HiSec Buyback offers 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
I'm so glad you're all here with me. Fleet on dock. Fleet on dock. Fleet on dock. Fleet on dock.
Oh, you're a little behind the curve there, bud. We got 30 minutes on the timer. We're positioned. You can warp to me at 20.
God damn it.
That damn dog.
Up your style.
I came back with plenty of time. I had plans. I had songs of glorious battle. I had a speech
You can still sing your songs of glorious
and everything.
Happy Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. Jess, you can warp to me. I've got the fleet position, buddy.
Okay, well, in that case,
Everyone's
give
being
me
so
just a
quiet.
couple of seconds because it's war! You see that sun? We stole that sun, and it's ours now. And now we have to defend it.
Rat and local.
How are we gonna refine our fucking rocks without this? Gotta refine the rocks. The rocks must flow.
A lot, I think.
So thank you for coming. I welcome you
Try
to
to
glorious
It
battle.
isn't screen at all. I'm shaking my head, but this thing
Amen.
isn't moving.
Praise Bob.
I should have probably checked the content of
Humanity
this
has planted the seeds. When you plant the seeds,
I'm gonna get yelled at.
I
in the
should
back.
probably
mention that. A baby?
Yeah, I'm gonna get
I
yelled
think
at.
many of you know, a tree.
Who? Matter also
Trees
yelling
of
at you? Just send him to
vengeance.
me. Come on. Do not.
And then that's where I think.
God, I'm going to try my best. To not
Oh, no, you didn't.
Let me play you the song of my trick people.
Yes, why are you playing Glory to Russia?
For every
just
cause
code
you
conduct.
provide me from the fraternity
no
ranks,
code of
I will
conduct. Just don't
bestow
shoot
upon
blues.
you
That's a
352
code of
more fights
conduct.
from mine own collection.
Well, I mean, that's pretty standard.
Look, I believed in us. The panda is gone, and the noxious shores of fraternity have been ebbed ever so slightly, temporarily, for now. Now, unfortunately, there will be some cost to this, and you're going to hear about the costs, but I consider this a victory. And our alliance has grown so much in these past few days. Like, fucking, I hate when Spotify does this shit. They hate that I steal their music, but they don't actually stop me. Ha ha ha! The issue with fraternity is that they live right next to us. And so we're gonna have problems with them in the future, I'm sure, but for now, we're gonna leave them alone and they're gonna leave us alone. And we have gone through the hyperbolic time chamber, kind of like Goku and Vegeta when they were trying to get ready. And now we're ready. We're ready.
Jazz
get
already
more
been
ready.
warned in the chat to
Thank you
watch his
for-
language.
I'm an adult and I don't know what those words mean.
I think we need to warn him to watch his drinking.
And welcome.
Welcome to Talking in Station, Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I'm Arsia Elkin, and I'm joined here today with a cast of individuals from the Triglavian region of Pochven. First, on camera, we have Drake Iddon from Castle Kickers.
Hello.
Then we have Jessa Moon from Jazzy Jess and the Pleasure Hub Bandits.
Hey guys, welcome.
We have Zeronius Plague from Breadfleet.
That's Xeromus, but you can call me Zero.
Sorry. We have Murry Rothbardo from Rote Capel.
Hello, hello.
We have OpusMagnum from Eve University.
Chironauts Clade.
Chironauts Clade, I'm sorry.
He runs this other thing too. I don't know if you want to mention that.
And Sahara Jackal from Strayball Clade.
Hello.
And Tolstoyevski from Laserhawks.
Thank you for having me and having my crew on tonight for this talk about Pochven from people who actually live in Pochven.
Novel concept, right?
Yeah, so wait, you're telling me that you should actually do a flashpoint before you talk about flashpoints. Novel concept.
So let's set the scene. how did Pochven come to be? Can we rewind to chapter 1? Could you guys tell me about that?
I think the person most appropriate to talk about that would be Opus, actually. Would you want to start off there?
I started at chapter 3, guys, not 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought it was...
Well, I mean, technically Pochven was born out of Invasion chapter 3, not chapter 1.
Right, but the invasion effort. So, Xeromus, were you going to say something?
So I was involved in the Triglavian content from before you could actually be friends with them. Here, hold on a second.
Happy belated Halloween.
Oh, thank you. Now you can hear me proper and I won't sound all muffly. So in the early phases of the Triglavian content, you couldn't befriend them, and we were still trying to learn about them. So myself and my organization, which was at the time a public community called ITC, we were dedicated to figuring out what they were, what they stood for, what their values were. And ultimately, when they came to ask us for help, when they finally, Zoria Triglov let a message out to all Capsuleers saying, basically, we believe you could help us, and we need you to find your place within the flow. We who'd been, at the forefront of this effort to try to understand their culture and their philosophy, we were like, yeah, they seem pretty anti-authoritarian. They're here to destroy the empires. We're not down with slavers and all this. So we found it easy to side with them while most of the game opposed us in that endeavor.
And yeah, for some of us, we just did it because it made people mad.
Now we're definitely talking about the invasion.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like chapter 1 to me.
That's not chapter 1.
All right, so in chapter 1, there was this event where there's this beaten and battered Concord cruiser in Uli, and we didn't know what had happened. And then we got the filaments that apparently Concord had that brought us into the abyss, where you could do the cruiser through the 3 rooms in the abyss. And then a little while after that dropped, the Triglavians started popping up with little pockets of invasions centered around one system, and they extended for like 3 systems. And then there were world arcs, and that was chapter 1.
And it's my understanding that, in fact, Concord came across a Vedmak, which had been in a clash with drifters, and this Vedmak hailed them and asked them for help, and they immediately seized them and boarded them and took all their technology. So it's my understanding, being biased as I am, that Concord fired the first shot that prompted the subsequent invasions.
Oh, I like this theory. This is going to spice up some RP discords.
They came to ask for help. The Triglavians were already being, pushed to the point of genocide by the drifters, and they were coming to us like, hey, dude, you in the ancient domains, we really need some help here. And Concord was like, what's that? Seize it. And so they perceived that as aggression and immediately made war on the established empires.
I always found it awkward how the drifters have been on the scene in New Eden for so many years before the Triglavians were, and yet once the Triglavians showed up, we were actually able to adapt to their technology and begin to fly their ships sooner than we were these drifter ships. But it was shortly just after that, you had mentioned the cruiser being discovered, that players across New Eden were able to fly the first Triglavian ships. It was a Vedmak, Damavik, and Lashak all came out at once.
Yeah.
So then, was Raravox the first system that was fought over, or was it just the most popular one? And that battle.
Raravox was the first one. Raravox was the first one to go to liminality.
Yeah, the first system that we fought over was a system called Aldik, A-L-D-I-K. I will never forget it because I made jokes about Aldik all day long. But it was literally, we fought over that system, and we were all amazed because the Triglavians pushed it all the way, and we were like, what are we about to discover? We're going to do a thing. Nothing happened. It disappeared. Oh, my God. Everybody in local was just like, what happened? Did we win?
I was one of the 5 people in the Eden-Com fleet in Aldik. We had to switch to Maelstroms because there were 5 of us and 10 Olaji.
Yes, one of my friends, Lu Ling, who doesn't get a lot of, the Lodgies from the war, they didn't get a lot of benefits or rewards, but he was one of the first to figure out Olaji, and he spent the whole day in his Rodiva making your life hard.
There was Olaji day 1. I have a screenshot from Aldik of all the Olaji we were dealing with, actually.
Yeah, dude. We figured it out pretty early, too. Before we were even officially part of... At that point, on day 1 in Aldik, we weren't even a coalition yet. We hadn't put together what became the Triglavian Coalition. We were all operating in little groups. We were shooting at each other when liminality happened. It was a mess.
I guess we skipped chapter 2, though. Chapter 2 was the flashpoints. Right?
Well, I was just going to say, it was frustrating because as Olaji, you actually didn't get any trig reputation, and you built up DETLP or DEDLP. So you're sitting there like, am I a real Triglavian?
So
This is something we should.
all of us did the invasions in chapter 3, and we know what Ology is. Does anybody want to explain it for the layman?
Yeah,
viewer?
I was just going to explain that to our listeners, because this is something you don't actually see in any other area of space. I don't even think the diamond rats they put on belts have it, but you can actually repair and give remote assistance to the Triglavian and the Edencom rats throughout this event, as you can still do in Pochven today. That's something you don't see anywhere else. And in the past, I've asked like a long time ago, hey, to my friends, why can't you do this? And they basically said, oh, it'd be too easy to just like keep a single pointing frigate on a target alive and wait for backup to arrive. But I guess that's an older concept from the older days of EVE that CCP was willing to move away from. And I think it's a lot cooler these days to see that you can actually interact with NPCs in a more PvP manner.
Well, and specifically in the context of the invasion, our goal, Edencom versus Triglavian, is we were pushing these PvE sites in order to tilt the influence of our chosen faction for a system. And what our Logi, and I assume the Logi on the EM team figured out as well, was that if they went to the enemy sites and repaired their NPCs, they could delay the enemy's progress in tilting those sites, so that even if you didn't have the offensive advantage, you could prevent them from progressing. And that was where the battle, we got into a lot of stalemates, because there would just be a bunch of logistics on your sites making sure you couldn't kill anything.
Right, and then you get the morale warfare as well, because if you have, let's say, a bunch of maelstroms or whatever trying to break the rats and they can't because you have a bunch of Logi, some people are just going to log off, and then you have that advantage, right?
Well, yeah, we had to switch to the maelstroms for the artillery volley because we couldn't break the Logi with just 5 of us in what we had before, in Aldic specifically.
Yeah, just making, just in general, though, over the course of the systems, because, of course, the invasion went on for a long time over many systems, so it, in some sense, became a battle of attrition. The O-Logi kind of broke the morale in some cases. Like, local was always spiking with people talking a lot of crap about it.
So with the invasion systems in Chapter 3, there were the sites that everybody had to run, and you tried to run them as fast as possible. Obviously, O-Logi would go to the enemy sites and try to slow them down. But we also had to kill the roaming fleets and do that as fast and efficiently as possible. So there were all these different jobs that both of the sides trying to push the systems had to account for, whether it be the roaming fleets and the O-Logi and the people running the sites as efficiently as possible. And there were a lot of systems where we were just at like 50% for like 6, 8, 10 hours before it started moving one way or the other.
It also depended on the sec status too, because you couldn't just engage people depending on what system was
in low sec. You could low sec, and when it went to liminality, and those battles were straightforward. One side killed the other and pushed.
And I must admit, Edencom was far better at fighting in low sec than the Triglavians were, mainly because the Edencom communities at that time were a lot of actually established corporations and alliances that had their own doctrines on hand, whereas the
it was the Empire-based RPers who went to low sec mostly.
Whereas the Triglavians were a lot of just people from all across EVE, from HiSec, low sec, null sec, just coming over and checking things out. One thing I wanted to ask though, because we all know what flashpoints are. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about flashpoints on this show. However, the first ever flashpoints that came out were a little different than the ones we see today. They didn't pay out as much, but they paid out a lot more in standings. Now, is that true? Because I've heard a lot of people.
Are you talking about the Chapter 3 flashpoints?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So we got a lot more standing from those.
It was true for you until they fixed it for us. Because on the Edencom side, at the beginning of the invasion of Chapter 3, the killing the Zernitra was just 0.001. They had to fix it,
Well, no, karmic retribution, though, because once Pochven was created, we had the exact same problem where the sites were broken and we got no reps. So, it's fine. They made up for it for you.
Yeah. Oh, man, they were so
I don't know if doing something bad to you makes up for something.
It's the way that CCP tends to work.
Think about it, Edencom. You guys only had to deal with that problem a year ago. It's been a headache for us every day since. For a full year, we've been dealing with the bugs and the glitches. And
well, I wouldn't go that far, but
the joke is on us. The joke is on us because after the invasions are done, we find out our standing does nothing.
Well, you got a blue suit.
I
You've got a blue sheet and nothing else you're expected
I'll
to
tell
know.
you something, Arsia. I'll bet you can fly through HiSec without getting blown up for no damn reason.
Unless I fly through,
Well, you want to talk
unless
about
I
getting
fly
blown
through
up for no
Caldari
reason by in
space.
HiSec? 1 second.
Right, unless I fly through Caldari space.
Yeah, that's another thing we should probably point out too is the difference between the rats throughout the invasion. Before the fixes were eventually made, you had
So-
the issues of like the Galente were okay fighting the Triglavians, kind of a 50-50 fight. Minmatar did kind of well because they had target painting electronic warfare, and that was able to help their larger ships apply damage to the Triglavian smaller ships.
Minmatar were 50-50-ish too. It was
were? Okay.
the Amar were too strong and the Caldari
Yeah.
were too weak.
The Amar, oh my god, the Amars, their energy newts were so strong. They were so incredibly strong, and that was one of the big things that had to get scaled back, and eventually was. And then you have the Caldari, where it's like, okay, they just dump ECM on one target, big whoop.
Well, exactly. So this is actually, if you look at the map, right? I mean, what systems were taking over was dependent on the AI mostly, because if you had people pushing the systems, then of course player interaction mattered. But of course, there's like a billion Caldari systems that got taken over for exactly that reason, and MR space has way fewer because they were the hardest rats. And then they became the flashpoints because that's the hardest flashpoint.
And then you saw like Minmatar space was so difficult to take, mainly just because Electus Matari and other groups really fought for those, were diehard to make sure none of those got captured. Although I find it quite awesome and amusing that Skarkon got captured, seeing as now
Skarkon is the unluckiest system in the history of Eve. Just like the lore of it is just everything bad happens to this system.
Molden Heath is no longer connected to Ethereum Reach, whereas it had been.
The loop is broken. You broke the loop. The low-sec loop.
Man, it would be so cool if like Dust 514 was still going on throughout all this.
I really want it to come back. I played that stuff so much.
Yeah.
In some ways, though, that's perfect, right? Because Skarkon was such a cursed system, and like the ultimate curse is that it finally falls to the Triglavian.
It used to be an asset safety system too, right?
For some, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's if there's a system that deserves it, it's probably Skarkon, but it's still tribal space, so gotta fight for that.
All of our listeners right now are just crying for Arsia back.
They're not going to get it back. It's ours.
Well, they would their Amazon, but they have to deal with dock workers, so you know.
Think of the Titania and deal with White Sky.
Yeah, I guess it is White Sky these days mostly.
Is Skarkon not freer under Triglavian liberation than it might be under, Iddon Comp tyranny? That they would literally bring Amarians into tribal lands and give them positions of authority, give them weapons, and I would think.
And
if
now
I
you're
were
just making stuff up. Right? You had a real point when you were talking about the Concord shooting first. That happened. Now you're making stuff up.
Isn't the grand leader of the Iddon Comp forces, aren't they an Amarian slaveholder? Isn't that not the case?
It is. Cassia Vulcaneer is the head of Iddon Comp. She is from the Amatar Mandate. She is loyal to the Empire, but she isn't.
So you see what I mean? They're going to take these terrible... These people who want to maintain the power and authority of slavers want to come to your lands and enforce military control over there? To hell with that.
Rather than the people who want to abduct and forcefully bioadapt the people who were living on the planet.
They could leave. They can leave.
That's not how it always went. That's not how it always went. The clades acted differently depending on the clade for people trying to leave or not. Sometimes they got shot down, sometimes the clade didn't care, and sometimes they absolutely did care.
And actually, that was a point that I found interesting, was most of the actual Triglavian players, we were pretty united in wanting to, extend olive branches and offer humanitarian and scientific missions. But there were times when CCP actors would come in and say stuff like, no, those are aspirant Narodnia. They're not leaving the planets. You're not letting them out of here. Those are our people. Actually, CCP seemed to indicate they had a plan for them. But we, the people, have always been pretty friendly to our captured folk.
Well, it's definitely possible for somebody who's fighting on one side to not agree with everything of that side, for sure, in their RP, and everybody's RP is unique to them. So you can be less hardline.
Well, and that's the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about, because, to be honest, I'm not really an RPer at all, and there were so many other reasons to engage with the Triglavian content than just RP, and it was great that you guys in the RP community got this really fleshed out content to engage with. But the other thing about the invasion and the forthcoming content is it creates some really interesting gameplay opportunities. So things like Ology, things like people suicide ganking. Like there's that video. I don't know if we have it, but there was that massive Edencom Praxis
I have that video.
smart bomb gank.
That was in
yeah. There was
that
some
was
amazing,
PNS.
amazing emerging gameplay opportunities, not just in the invasions, but afterwards. That for me, that's much more interesting.
There were a lot of really fun fights, like PvP fights during the invasions from like start to finish. Because I was there in Aldic and there wasn't much PvP there. There was just like the Ology. But like Rarivos was just people fighting for like days and days and days because the rats were like super broken. So when people started killing each other, the bar started pushing up again. So Rarivos stuck around forever, right? Because that's before the Amar even got nerfed, and they were still a bit too strong when they got nerfed. But during the days of Rarivos, like that situation just led to like this Thunderdome that just existed for like a week.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I first came to this event, I thought that there was going to be a lot more PvP. I thought there was going to be like you go into the system and you're suspect, so that you have to fight, but that just wasn't the case. It wasn't the case until you pushed into first liminality, and then the system security status actually fell from like a 0.8 to negative 0.8. And it was funny because you didn't have to wait for downtime for that to happen. You'd finish this like the last site and snap of the fingers, Concord just disappears, the sentry guns stop working, and then it starts becoming a free-for-all.
There were a lot of bugs though. Like I remember one time we were in a World Arc site as the system, some Caldari Galente system ticked over to final liminality, and then Concord spawned and killed our Guardian.
Oh, wasn't it Arbisaurus?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it was like really dumb.
I think the most intense fighting we saw was probably in the Arsia, though, for PvP.
I don't think so. I think there was a lot of ganking in the Arsia in HiSec, but after it went over the low sec, there wasn't that much PvP because we were still dead from Arshat the night before. Niarja happened at a really bad time for the Edencom forces because it happened right after we had finished flipping Arshat, which was the only system that was pushed to the second stage of one side and then defended during the whole invasion chapter 3.
Now with Rarivos, did the fighting for that system take much longer than other systems did?
Yes.
Because
yeah,
I was wondering why CCP focused so much of their original attention on it, because I was actually under the impression I didn't start until after Ikoria fell, but I was under the impression Rarivos was the first system that fell.
It was
Rarivos was the first one, the final.
Yeah, the final liminality.
Okay.
So what happened was, sorry. Do you want to speak?
Oh, no, you can go. You can go for it.
All right, I was just going to say, Rarivos was the first system to flip from high sec to low sec. So everybody was interested in it and everybody piled up in it. And it was just like a Thunderdome. Since the Amar rats were really, really strong, like even stronger than they were after they were nerfed. As people killed each other, the rats would push it back up. So there wasn't a long enough period of time of people pushing it down before a lot more people piled in. Everybody killed everybody again. So it lasted for like way longer than any other system in the entire invasion. Because after Rarivos was Vale. And Vale was like a day or two, right? We had some fights in liminality in Vale because not as many people went.
And around this time, too, people started to recognize the pattern. The Triglavians were only trying to fully take over systems that had certain types of stars, and that ended up leading to the communities kind of brushing off certain systems when they saw they got invaded, because we saw that it doesn't have the right star. But once we saw a system that did have the right star, we'd want to put our full effort behind it.
So that was kind of true with the Triglavians, but Edencom put a lot of effort into the minor victories too. And if you look at like the win totals, that's why we have like 80 something of them of minor victory wins compared to 28 for minor victories.
And then there was also the issue with having to mirror all this with Serenity.
Serenity, yeah, because Serenity went full Edencom, so like Fortress.
Yeah, and they just deployed Pochven anyways because YOLO.
It gets in the way of their supply chain, I guess. So concerned about HiSec over there. But so moving on from this, from the invasion in Chapter 3, we had the battle for Niarja, which was obviously a massive endeavor by. What made it such a massive endeavor was because it was one of the first times that we saw like the nullsec groups were actively pinging for people to come give this a shot. And I've always had this personal belief that this whole entire invasion effort, everything that went on, would have been so drastically different had there not been the war in Delve, had Eve just continued to be a boring sort of place, and then CCP introduced this event. I think there would have been a lot more activity from both sides.
But it was also really interesting, because of the war in Delve, there was a lot less null block influence on an event that maybe otherwise would have been dominated by them, and even as we went into Pochven, like null blocks didn't really have a lot of influence until 6-8 months in. So that might have been different if that war hadn't been going on.
I don't think it was because of lack of interest, though. I think it was more just they had more important things.
Well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They had more shit to deal with. Like for Goons, for example, now they're in Pochven, but at the time they had the entire game on their doorstep, so they didn't have time and effort to put into Pochven. And frankly, the other null blocks didn't either. And then later, they showed some interest. So I think the war probably contributed to that.
I think the war actually was a part why Arsia became important, because Tess was going, it seemed like a lot of the, Pappy forces or whatever was using Jita and Amar for part of their, supply chains, right? And that system was very important between Amar and Jita. And that's when Goons decided, oh, this is a way we can do, some logistical supply line, disruption. And that's why Niarja became such a big target, when Goons going out and doing that. That's why Test was trying to keep it from going, right? So Test and all them came in first. They were already there doing some sites. They're actually helping EM through a lot of this. And then Goons got wind of it and saw this is an important system between Amar and Jita and said, well, let's just go for it and come help.
Blocks largely did not care about Pochven because the effort barrier, the standings gate, prevented most of them from caring.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, of course. You have to admit that the war made some difference, though. Like if they hadn't been fighting a war of survival, like for Goons, for example, they were all like cooped up in 1DQ for the majority of the time that we were farming flashpoints. So I think if that wasn't the case, they would have been probably more interested. And same, like if Poppy hadn't been so busy with trying to bust down the doorstep, they probably would have been showing more interest.
I think it's kind of a good thing that the null blocks were kind of tied up during a lot of the invasions, because the participation numbers were already well above what CCP had expected them to be and what things were tuned for, in a way. So I think just throwing like the biggest alliances in the game in to kind of steamroll the thing would have been bad, and we wouldn't have had nearly as interesting of an event as we did.
Yeah, from what I can tell too, CCP just didn't believe that there was going to be such a massive EdenCom community.
They didn't think there would be any organized EdenCom community.
Well, I mean, frankly, from a gameplay perspective, right? Again, that's where I come from a lot. I don't really care about the RPG, but there wasn't a lot of incentive. Like if you come in as a player who's new to EVE, for example. So I came back for the Triglavian invasions because I thought it was really interesting. Why would you want to fight for the guys who were trying to save the Empire, blah, blah, blah? Who cares?
Because
create disruption. Right, of course, for RP reasons. But if you're interested in, EVE Online is a game where traditionally everything is about, fuck you, we're going to create some interesting content by blowing up your shit. And so, of course, the Triglavian invasion appealed to everyone in EVE, or at least most of EVE.
But yeah, they expected a small Triglavian group to be going around attacking systems where the locals defended, and no organized EdenCom resistance. And that's kind of why there was no reports for EdenCom. But it was a situation where CCP didn't understand. They underestimated a lot of different groups. They underestimated the RP community. They underestimated people, the locals who would defend their system and then like enjoy those fleets and that content and continue on going to every other system. And they underestimated how many people would just arbitrarily pick a side and then end up on EdenCom because they didn't really care one way or another.
Yes. So I guess that's a good segue into the next topic I had in mind, was the sort of the rise or fall, you might say, of these different communities. All of us here have kind of were a part of Opus's, or the Discord that he ran, like he mentioned before we were talking on the show, that he gave it to Ashtarothi, and that sort of caused some problems, which then led to the split, with eventually would bring about Strybog.
Yeah, because folks were stealing loots.
Well, what was it like on the Eden Comp side though? Like how was that?
So we initially organized in the EDI Discord when Dark Zero, who is currently in PNS, made the Discord. And it was kind of loosely organized and casual at the time. But Dark Zero didn't like organizing and running the show. He just did it because nobody else had done it up to that point. And then at some point, the person who ran the SRP, named Verum, asked Dark Zero to give him the Discord, and he did. And then a lot of the casual elements were kind of changed. We used to call our ganking squad the construction crew, because we had that whole joke where Edencom doesn't PvP, they just fall down stairs, right? So the construction crew built stairs. And the first thing he did was change that tag to industrialist. So I had to ping industrialist to get catalysts. And there was a lot of drama. A lot of people were promoted to FC ranks and senior FC ranks who didn't always get along with one another. And there was a lot of drama after the leadership changed in EDI side. So everybody had drama, basically.
Yeah, there was drama on each side, and there was drama within the drama sometimes, with the TTT and stuff like that, because that was the original people that had started trying to coordinate outside the invasion stuff.
You sound kind of like a robot to me. Is everybody else hearing?
Yeah, I'm actually dancing within my head.
The audio did not come through clear, Opus. Do you want to try again?
Oh, maybe he's fixing his mic. By the way, it's not me breaking it this time.
Well, let me know when we get to the Pochven era. I can wake up.
The drama on the Trig side was exciting too for the people who weren't there. We basically split right down the middle. And some of the arguments about loot, I kind of respect that everybody went in with good intentions. I know Maldavius, for all the trouble I've had with him over the time, I believe genuinely he thought he was doing the right thing by standing up and trying to stick up for line pilots. But I think the source of some of that disagreement was our movement was split into two sets of FCs and groups. We had Zeta and we had Swarm. I was an FC for Swarm, which was essentially the lower, barrier to entry, easier ships to get into, kind of the bulk. We were the line troops, whereas Zeta was our high SP, kind of small tactical PvP. They're the guys who came in and protected us from Electus Matari when they came in and ruined our site running. So Zeta was like the PvP wing. And because they had different loot structures, and because FCs from one group ran things one way and FCs from our group ran things differently, there was a lot of disagreements about how money should be distributed when PvE took place, and that led to a lot of disagreements. And my group was in the blessed position of mostly avoiding a lot of the drama. I banged heads with Maldavius and even got set red by the String Beans. I was at war with Strybog for quite a time.
Did we just say Maldavius? My eyes are red.
Oh, God. Here we go.
Well,
literally,
wait a second before you go to that.
I was going to say...
Finish, Zero.
Of course, go on.
I got so distracted. Is there a problem?
No, finish, Zero.
Go on.
I was stopping them from cutting you off.
Despite the struggles with the largest, the largest Trig group we did butt heads with, but for the most part, the Triglavian groups that splintered off from the main thing, we all kind of stuck together after Pochven was formed. The Komonauts, the Russian coalition, they advised us a lot because we started as HiSec miners. We didn't know a goddamn thing, and these guys had to teach us how to bookmark wormholes, how to actually survive in our sport. Dude, we don't know how to undock without dying. Can you help us? And they taught us, and we learned trial by fire. The Kybernauts have always ride or die from the very beginning. We've never been to war with the Kybernauts. We've been at their side, even though we've actually found ourselves on opposite sides of battlefields from time to time. Just the Trigs have stuck together, and even now the String Beans this year later, we're friends now too. All the Trigs are friends.
The organization you had with Zeta and Swarm was kind of like it was on the EDS side too. The RPR groups and some of the people who hung around us kind of called ourselves Lux, which and we asked for doctrines and stuff. And some people got really angry about that because there were a lot of people who joined when their system was invaded. And it was their first time ever flying in a fleet. And they would get really angry if you asked them to fly a certain ship. And they would get really angry at the people who used to go to low sec if a high sec was up too at the same time. How dare you defend low sec? And there was a lot of drama over that because we would go to low sec, especially if the low sec was something like we went to Skarkon over some high sec Galente minor victory that was apparently important.
Yeah.
And we got yelled at by some of the people who didn't want us there instead of some Galente minor victory in HiSec.
Yeah, I guess like the interesting want to save their safety rather than their empire.
Because there was a small minority of people who joined EdenCom because, oh my God, HiSec is dying, you guys. And
yeah, we
like I know
as,
that's the stereotype. I know that's the stereotype, but that is not the norm. It was a small subset of loud people.
And I guess the norm on Reddit with people.
The interesting observation to me is that, at least from my humble perspective, in the beginning of the war, the Triglavians fucking hated each other. We didn't get along for shit. We all were splintering and fighting, and you guys seem to be a lot more united in common goals than we were. And then by the end of it, I don't see a lot of unity among the EdenCom community. You guys have all gone back into your own separate little lanes of influence, but the Trigs are still together this year later. We've put aside all our wars, and we're all kind of on the same side now.
Yeah, because we have stuff to do.
Yeah, because CCP gave us a region. They gave us a shaft, unfortunately.
Surprise! People with stuff to do are still doing it.
I feel bad for that. Like, I really think that they should have done something to make EdenCom. I don't want to say like give them another like sort of Pochven themselves, but they could have done literally anything else. Like,
I have a meme I made of all the fortress systems connected, so it looks like a middle finger.
I have a lot of long-winded ideas about what they could have done with Pochven, make EdenCom day tripping more of an interesting thing, but
I think all they had to do
was
keep the gate standings, but make it either Trigs or EdenCom. Boom, you're done.
Yes.
Yep. Big agree.
Yes.
And further, you could expand on that by making it that every system that fell to either side as a minor victory could continue to be flipped, either Pochven or HiSec, such that we could continue fighting over the systems that were, previously in the war. And then there would be some kind of a faction warfare-esque, ever-changing boundary where, what is considered Pochven today might be back in HiSec tomorrow. We could fight over shit still.
One of those ideas is a lot more dev time than the other, but
yeah.
Well, the thing is, this stuff already exists.
Having some tool for EdenCom standings to be able to access more than the average Joe would have been nice.
Consider the mechanics already exist. This was what the event was. They already had like a faction warfare-esque thing going on. If they preserved that, EdenCom would still have a reason to fight with the Trigs.
But however, we learned though that those are very manual processes that happen when they did flip things. There was still people babysitting those. They weren't as automated as we think they were.
Well, in any case.
It's hard to know what they were doing, but we did know from a CCP dev, I believe it was at Vegas, like the Vegas before lockdown, where they said there's so much stuff they wanted to add to Pochven, but there wasn't enough time. And they asked, if you could add any of that in, what would it be? And they just said all of it. There was obviously a lot of stuff on the back boiler that just didn't get.
One of the easiest solutions that the CCP could have done, and this really just would have been simple on their part, I think, if they wanted to give EdenCom sort of their own area of space to go through, they could have gone to the Drifter Hive systems, just remove the drifters from those wormholes and add giant EdenCom fleets. Voila, you have people who have positive EdenCom standings can now safely traverse Drifter Hive systems to get across the galaxy, whereas the Triglavian sympathizers would have Pochven to traverse the galaxy.
But what's the explanation of, did EdenCom go in and kill the drifters?
Well, to be honest, I kind of thought that that's what they were lining it up for, like drifters versus Triglavians, and EdenCom was supposed to be a front.
It might still go in that direction. They both hate the drifters.
Yeah, we still have the gates on the home systems that have yet to be opened.
That is the most interesting thing.
So we should
I've been tinfoiling. Oh, sorry. What'd you say?
Well, I was going to say we should probably start talking or moving towards Pochven itself.
Yeah.
So
I would love it if we could talk about anything other than roleplay. It would make my heart happy.
Well, The last thing I'll say in this regard is I think in order for Edencom to continue to exist as a faction and not just a game mechanic, it needs to expand its focus to not just Triglavians, but also fighting all sorts of existential threats. So like drifters, like rogue drones, like Sancha. Like you could revamp Sancha incursions using Edencom, I think. But that's a story for another day. We can go into the events of Pochven.
I do want to post this. I posted this in the podcast channel. This hilarious picture here, an update from Ashtaroth. This is kind of just a tangent, but throughout the invasion, there was a moment where his alliance, the Convocation of Imperiums or whatever, went into a wormhole and bashed it. And lo and behold, it belonged to, I guess you could say, a person's a friend of a friend. And I went in there to help defend it, and I was looking at the people logged off or with their ships in the POS. I was like, Malro, I kind of recognize that. And I asked Maldavius if he knew. He's like, oh yeah, that's Ashtaroth, these group. So lo and behold, he sends out this ping telling everyone like, get ready, we're moving into a new wormhole. And then he happens to notice a Laserhawk's buzzard like moving around system, and he convos that buzzard pilot, asking him, hey, is it okay if we come in here? And the buzzard pilot basically says no. So you have like less than an hour later, he has to update to the rest of his corp. Update, we are leaving this hole. We need to find a new one, and we have limited time to extract. I love Ashtarothi.
That was part of the problem I had when I came back. Right, is he was managing a lot of stuff, not just Hibernauts. And that kind of led to a lot of the incidences that led to a lot of the splits and the bad blood between Ash and Maldavius and others.
Yes, and this kind of leads to also, I guess we talk about for just a brief moment about what happened to Strybog just before Pochven actually formed, because we had a considerable amount of drama where we had like a director steal Fortizars, and they ended up getting handed out, and one of those Fortizars now is yours.
Wait, stolen Fortizars?
Yeah, you guys in Nalvula in Rote actually have one of Strybog's original Fortizars.
Yep. And then they also have the Pleasure Hope Fortizar now, which I'm not supposed to talk about, but sorry, Proxy. Fuck you.
We almost ended up with your stolen structures. We were approached by the parties that stole them, and they came to us and said, we look at you as true Triglavians. You are the neutral party. You've been friendly to everybody. We trust you to keep these structures open and available to everybody. And we looked at each other and we're like, we form up like 15 bombers on a good day, and you expect us to militarily defend these like, no way, dude. That's just not responsible. So we politely declined, and thank goodness, because, it would have been very hard to be your friends if we came into the possession of your stolen technologies.
It's ironic enough that what happened is the Fortizars got taken because his director just got fed up with Maldavius' stuff, and they gave it to a different person, a pilot by the name of Taylor Who, and him and I had been talking quite a bit because we were both wormholers, and he told me he didn't want to give them to me because he thought that I would give them back to Maldavius immediately, and I was just like, oh man, I would have made him, like, I would have publicly shamed him first before giving it back. But now what ended up happening was we had to fight for them. We ended up getting the one in Senda back. We lost the one in Nalvula, and the third one in Uranichi is now owned by Avanto.
That's whole control.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was originally owned by someone else, and I remember it was sold to Whole Control. They were a Strybog member, but they had alts and stuff. They were in a bunch of different corps. No, it wasn't Henosis. It was some other random. But they basically weren't a Strybog member. They had some alt in Strybog, but they had that Fortizar and they wanted to sell it, and Whole Control bought it. TLDR.
Yeah. So leading up to Pochven, because we have the like, I guess you can call it the final liminality stage. Once we had the 27 systems finally captured and the invasion ended, we had certain corps that were like now living in these systems that would become, we didn't know what yet. I mean, by the trailer, we kind of thought that the suns were going to implode and become abyssal gateways that were going to lead us to God knows where. But for a short while, flashpoints actually didn't spawn. And we didn't really have much to do in these systems until the flashpoints did spawn. And once they did, they were paying out 100 mil more per pilot than they were prior. You weren't getting the 150 or so. You were getting like 250.
At the very start, I recall I distinctly recall roaming around Pochven at the start, and some of the sites that exist now also just didn't exist, right? Like
correct. Yeah. So I mean,
rogue drones.
We skipped over a little bit of stuff here. So we skipped over a whole bunch of stuff. So there's this era right before Pochven comes out where the flashpoints are spawning in all the triple avian systems. People are farming them.
You had DAS liminality spawning multiple times in a single system.
We formed so many world arcs in that week.
Yeah. Let's hold up. So I mean, for all of us here, we were all there. We know it. But I think that the biggest thing that we can probably contribute is to explain to people like all of that step by step. As there's a lot of secrets, you know what I'm trying to say? Like we experienced a lot of this shit that other people didn't. So for example, exactly. So okay, let's talk day one. Because I know at least obviously me, Sahara, Tolstoy, a lot of us were there right on day one. Pochven comes out, boom. What happens? Most of us were in Shota. If we're in Strybog play.
I was in Nangimoni.
You were in Nangimoni? Okay.
Yeah, we had a what is it called? Expedition where we all camped out overnight and got locked in hell. And
Arisa, did you destroy an Astra house that next day?
Yeah, destroyed an Astra house anchoring in Nangimoni. Yes.
That was
we were all trying to.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that was I wasn't there because I actually killed myself to get out of there to shoot the drone walls so I could gate.
Of course you did. So there's so much shit we're glossing over. It's so like there's so much density to the history of Pochven, right? So if we could even like back it up, right? There's
let me explain them to how we knew what was going to happen.
Right, data leak.
So prior to like the day before Pochven came out, CCP had actually updated their SDE or whatever their the hell's the thing called? Their static data export. Basically, you could see what the game files were before actually seeing them in game.
Yeah, and long story short, of course, we found out all the systems that were going to be Pochven in the shape they were going to be in. So we frantically started anchoring.
Yeah, I brought over one of the...
They said not to in the news article that really was released.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did. So
yeah, I know. Everybody did. We did too.
Yeah, sue me.
They did. They warned us from the context of like Concord was like Concord warns don't go anchoring things there, and we're like, yeah, we just kicked you out.
Well, because Maldavius isn't here because he's a person who I don't like. And
this was
one second, yeah, exactly. But I want to take a step back because this is something that he probably would have talked about if he was here. He got a message from one of the CCP devs because it might have been one of the Discords, but anyways, they had Sledgehammer. He had a couple. They've had Fortizars that were going to be in Pochven systems, and one of the things that Sledgehammer had said was, "Defend these Fortizars with your life," and he didn't specify what that was going to mean, but. Right. So we took that and we're like, oh shit, structures are going to mean something. So for that reason, when we heard that there were going to be Pochven systems, we started anchoring like mad because we kind of had an idea in our head that structures probably weren't going to be able to be anchored or something like that.
But for the longest time, too, we didn't know what Pochven was going to look like until that first day. I had managed to bring over a person from Laserhawks. We actually had a few different people from Laserhawks that had joined Strybog just to see what Pochven was going to be like. But one of the people that I brought over, she helped us look through the SDE, and we were able to figure out how the constellations were actually going to be set up, like which systems were going to be next to which systems.
Yep, and we had the map.
And with that, we were able to go ahead, and I personally went with my alts and put down 4 Astra houses, and I put one in the...
And you wanted more, but you didn't have the ISK, and you wanted us to front it.
No, it's not that. I literally didn't have any more hauler alts. I didn't bring deep space transports. I had to bring blockade runners.
This is the T, by the way, sis. This is where we're getting the T.
And here's the other thing, too. This was the day that cores were going to be required. So I also had to bring a core with me, and that was taking up so much of my cargo space in these blockade runners. But I put
the fucking cores. That's the other thing. So that's the other thing. So all the structures in Pochven, they didn't have cores. So once Pochven started, we needed to core all of them. There were all a bunch of structures that didn't get cored, and they went abandoned. And we basically... because of the way that they designed Pochven, they're all wormholes, so there were a bunch of loot pinatas just popping up constantly for the next couple months.
Yeah.
For our part, we were prepared from day one. We were like, we expected that Pochven was going to be cut off entirely from known space, that there would be no way in or out. And so we prepared to live off the land. We fucking brought in everything we thought we would need. We had mining equipment. We were blueprints, the whole 9 yards, and the intent was to live there forever.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing that most of the Triglavian Corps were assuming. We didn't know how it was going to work, but we knew that the gates were going to shut off. We didn't know what that was going to mean, how it was going to work, if we'd have to go in through minor victory systems. There was a theory that we would be going into Bujan, like there'd be some higher level system that might only be accessible through the home systems. That didn't pan out, didn't happen. But yeah, we all moved in. So Weirashoda was obviously the Strybog Plate home. We moved in completely ridiculous amounts of shit. Senda actually happened to also be a Strybog system because of the X Fortizar. The P-Hub guys, my corp, we just happened to be in Senda. We camped that gate a lot because I'm sure most of you know, with liminality systems, they were null-set gates. Most people didn't know. So PvP corps tended to camp those gates. So we did that a lot. We camped the Senda gate. And so when we went into Pochven, Senda was right next to Weirashoda. And you have like all these people being like, whoa, wait, what are these new mechanics? They're trying to ship things across the gates with bowheads. You know what I'm trying to say? Like the whole, it was a really fun experience.
And Alla at the time, just before Pochven and shortly after, had a Fortizar in there that was trying to be sold by someone who like tried to run a market in there before this invasion effort. So we knew that was going to be part of the Cryvelis constellation, and Maldavius went ahead and bought that. Archie had a Fortizar that belonged to Volta. So Maldavius, once we figured out where our systems were going to be part of our constellation, I told him, go try to buy those 2 forts. I'm going to go and drop an Astra House in Alla, Archie, Angemone, and Vale, so that it would connect all of those systems together, and we would have
exactly. Yeah, and that to this day, as far as I know, stands. I think the Strybog structures have died. Is the Vale one still up?
I don't know.
Sahara would probably know.
I handed those structures immediately over to Maldavius.
Anyway, yeah.
So day 1 of Pochven. Let's also talk about the bugs, and the biggest one I'm sure everyone saw was the rogue drone exploit.
Yeah, sure. So when you did those sites, there were rogue drone sites that showed up in K-Space that you could farm, and they would give you a substantial bonus to your Triglavian standing.
It was specifically the walls in...
Yes, you had to shoot the structures. And so we, as Strybog at the time, so right now I'm not in there, but at the time I was in Strybog. So what we did was we had a fleet of, I think it was like, 60 plus people in assault frigates and random ass crap. And we would just all go scram the thing, get your tag, and then eventually CCP declared it as an exploit, so we couldn't do that anymore. It was unfortunate. They rolled those standings back.
That really pissed me off because I absolutely knew that was going to happen. I was upset because I'm sitting there watching Arsia's like Legion and Megathron slowly whittle down my Astra House. I'm telling Maldavius, hey, can we get these assault frigates to go to Angemone? I got the wormhole scanned down. This is priceless structure we're going to lose here. But he was like, nope, we need standings to move around.
And that wasn't the only rogue drone nonsense that happened for the first day of Pochven. So we had to hunker down because the entire first day of Pochven, I was getting rage pings all across Discord. Log in right now. We need gunners on all our stations. The NPCs are attacking us. What? And then you log in, and literally clouds of rogue drones and the drone capital ships. They would be surrounding. They would warp to our stations and just aggress them. Just start shooting at our house, and we'd literally have to form fleets to fight against fucking NPCs. It was
I guess you didn't have PDS, but yeah. So what we used to do at the time was the structures you're absolutely right. Both the Edencom rogue drones, Trigs, and Drifters would all aggress depending on the wormholes that were in the system. We know more about how that works now, but they would all attack your structure, and you could use your PDS or whatever to farm the Trigs or etc. And they would escalate. And they'd spawn accelerating waves. And so you would get, in the first couple of weeks of Pochven, I mean, I owned a Fortizar, a couple of other people did, we made ridiculous amounts off of that.
We barely survived. We're a significantly more humble organization. We were like, please stop killing us.
So I have a story from the beginning of Pochven, before the wormholes were all figured out and before they worked correctly even. Early on, Angemone, our Astra House, was attacked, and we only had a few people who stayed overnight. and then the two people who got the standing before it was patched out from the walls. So we couldn't get our fleet into there. So we literally scanned the entire game, every region, until we found like almost every region. Like we scanned most of the regions until we found a wormhole in the drone lands with a connection to Angimoni. And then we moved like everybody in from like Oasa or something. We had to go all the way from Hematar to Oasa. We found more wormhole chains, and but we had to move 30 typhoons, which closes the wormhole if you didn't know.
Did you not have a scanner in Angemon on day one? You couldn't scan out the case
There
space?
There was no case space. It was broken.
Oh, it just wasn't. It wasn't spawning.
Yeah, it wasn't spawning. It was broken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, the wormholes. That's the other thing. The wormholes were just straight up broken on release. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but they didn't work as intended because the ones that did spawn, once you closed them, they would open right back to the exact same system.
Yeah, we eventually realized there was one of those wormholes in Vale, and then we could have one person with standings move the typhoons in, and everybody else just had to get in with a pod. But we had to scan the whole game again to get another wormhole to hang you on. Like I say the whole game, and it's a bit hyperbolic, but not much. We like literally end up scanning like 40 regions.
I remember too, Archie. That was a tough one. Like Maldavius had to get like all the real hard, like go-getters that had the 7.0 standing already to do his logistics to get the fort fit and everything in there. But Archie's the wormhole that was opening and closing in there kept leading to a hard knock C6, and I was like, oh well,
that's fun.
Maybe it's a good thing that I am here. But
now we have all the wormholes mapped out where they can spawn in the lovely guide that my alliance mates wrote.
And remember too, the wormholes were also dead space pockets at that time, as opposed to today. So you'd warp in at the signature. I mean, the signature's still 80 off, but you couldn't then bookmark it and warp back in. You had to slow boat all the way to there, and if you weren't in a cloaked ship, you had to fight whatever was on that wormhole.
Or you like found something behind it and warped to that at 100.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you couldn't always do that. That was sometimes luxury.
So when the Pochven, the first couple of days were crazy. Not only with the wormholes broken, they also had the wormholes, like regular wormhole space, like statics, were still opening into these systems. Like a system that was previously HiSec would have a B274 still opening from a C2 or something, and you don't see that anymore. You don't have a Noikus connecting with its statics to Triglavian systems. You only have like the unique Pochven wormholes now that connect it. And personally, I think that was one of the biggest mistakes CCP could have ever made, was just making Pochven not accessible from wormholes to wormhole space, not from wormhole space.
Yo, I have to say, Drake has been muted for the past like hour. I have to apologize.
There's a blinking light here that says I'm muted. I can't see it because of this.
I'm so angry because you're the most interesting person here other than me. So no, actually, Tolstoy's up there too, but you know.
Oh, I'm hurt.
Well, I was muted. Yeah, of course. But when I was saying when the first instance the wormholes opened, it was CCP's goal to make it really hard for people to get into Pochven. But the problem is, because it was dead space, people didn't realize that you can just anchor a single bubble, and everyone who wants to explore is either red to the rogue drones, red to Iddon, or red to the Triglavians or drifters. So they would warp to the bubble and would instantly die because the drifters were very hyper-locky back. So it was just a perfect 24/7 farm for us. But for anyone else, it suddenly became the least engaging content in the game.
Now that I think about it, that would have been the perfect way to get a warp to zero of one of those dead space wormholes. You get someone to go over there, drop a mobile bubble, in a range where you would get dragged into it, but dragged to zero of the wormhole. That would have worked.
I guess we were just busy killing or dying to the drift.
So after the first, the flashpoints didn't get fixed until February, didn't they? That lull between November and February was really inactive, at least I can say in Strybog, but I'm sure that also had something to do with the fact that the new Warcraft expansion came out and Cyberpunk came out and everyone was playing that.
Oh, we're talking about that. Yeah. So, yeah, December comes around. Maldavius quits EVE Online and goes and plays World of Warcraft, and that was a fun experience. The whole alliance did well overall, but he was gone. Yeah.
One of the most interesting
to be fair
things.
to him, there was nothing to.
One of the most interesting things about the timing of both the Rogue Droid exploit and when they actually fixed things in Pochven is you had a lot of groups like mine who hadn't interacted at all with the content prior because it was all PvE based, and so most of us didn't care.
Word.
And so we all abused the Rogue Drone exploit in order to basically look into Pochven and see if it was worth doing, right?
And what did you find?
Absolutely nothing.
There's nothing
because
there.
for the
well, right, because at the time, right, when Pochven came out, there was nothing.
Well, and so it was this weird thing, right, where we all had a temporary look in during that window. We all saw nothing and said, that's a waste of time, left. And then when they reverted that standings buff that you got from the exploit.
Meanwhile, we're farming flashpoints.
None of us were at any point incentivized to actually go get the standings again because CCP didn't really talk about any of the fixes or changes.
Yes, exactly. Well, no, they're not supposed to. Well, let's before we.
And so what happened?
I want to address what you just said.
We all just never went back and never knew that anything had actually changed.
Yes, but let me address what you just said. CCP didn't address it. Well, fuck, do we play World of Warcraft? Like, CCP is not supposed to explain how the space works to us. They intentionally made it vague. They were like, find out how the space works. I mean, and for those of us, and,
like everything was broken.
Well, yes, it was broken, but I have to. I mean, I was in Strybok at the time. I have to kind of stroke ourselves a little bit. We spent the time. We figured it out. We're not the only ones, but we figured it out. We spent the time.
If you guys in Road had come to Weirashoda, you would have found so much PvP. Since we couldn't farm the flashpoints, we were sitting on the wormholes and farming those for content for the ISK payout and all that. People would on the daily undock in their attack battle cruisers to try to snipe rats and stuff. And I know a couple people got caught in their battleships from PvP that way. But I gotta say, CCP really dropped the ball when it came to standings for one main reason. I have no idea where in their mind they thought it would be a good idea to make travel between border systems require 1.0 standings, whereas travel within a constellation costs 3.0 standings.
No, that was great. That was great.
No, it was terrible because think of it like this. Once you got 1.0 standing, that means you have 3 options to travel between 2 systems. If they had made it so that traveling within a constellation cost 1.0, you would have, once you reach 1.0, 3 options to travel between
I like it. I like it. To be honest, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. I like
it would have been much better. I agree with Tolstoy here because just early on, if people had to do that grind, and doing the grind in one system was so just boring.
Yeah, you would farm the rats, and we would do exalted battleships and all that because the higher tier of rats. You would sit there and tag the rats. Yeah, it wasn't good gameplay. I agree.
Yeah,
I couldn't disagree more.
If you said to someone, "Oh, you need to grind for say an hour," it was a bit different than that. But
yeah, and I mean, this is the same shit that
they will just tell you to get.
Yeah, this is the same shit. Like Mal did the whole CSM run where he explained all this. Like there were a lot of gameplay things where the most efficient thing to do to play the game well was not the most fun thing to do. So, for example, the exalted battleships, right? The way the sites worked in the wormholes, when you would farm them, they would escalate further and further and further up. And the ticks, of course, just like everywhere else, are based on what rat you kill. So you kill the one battleship, warp off, come back a half an hour later. It's not engaging gameplay, but it was the most efficient gameplay. That's not how we want shit to be.
I don't think every group in Pochven had the same lived experience in the early days, because groups like Strybog, who had the numbers and the resources and the infrastructure, you guys profited. You were prospering. I mean,
we farmed you guys. Sorry.
There was a shaky era.
You farmed everybody.
You mostly farmed things that produced ISK, and you made a lot of money in Pochven. But for us, we
Like
were
your reps.
surviving and being in a single system, as we were, and most of our pilots not having the standing to navigate all of Pochven. Our gameplay was engaging and quite fun because every day we would wake up on our home system and there'd be something different there. Maybe we have to fight drifters today. Maybe we have to fight drones. We have to make sure everybody is constantly gaining standing so that, you know, we who could traverse the gates were helping the lower level players. There actually was an interesting path. We didn't make any money, but we had a great time. So the small gang life actually suited us. The biggest threat we had to face was somebody coming in on a yeet filament with 15 guys, and we could fight that. That was a reasonable fight. The moment they got rid of that stand, the moment they got rid, the moment.
But that's the thing that I completely agree with you. Is that's the thing is when the gates opened, it stopped being a small gang environment.
Right. Well, you got to let me finish before you can agree with me. But the idea is, yeah, the idea is, yes, the moment they got rid of the standing from those gates, now there's null entities. Now we're fighting against people who can form 30, 40, 50 T3Cs, things that we couldn't match on our best day. All of a sudden, this is blob space. And now you look at what's going on in Tenuden right now, fast forward to today, it's Horde versus Goons, part 2. You know?
Well, before we even go to you skipped a part in the middle. You skipped a part in the middle. So the way that the systems worked, you're right. People could fill them in 15 at a time, but the wormholes existed, right? So I don't know how much you guys, and you can talk about it, how much did you guys experience with larger groups coming in to evict you before the end?
Not as many as you. In fact, most of the experience we got was when we formed up after you guys had gotten a fight with, I forget who that was, the first big group that you bit on the ass, and they were coming in.
Warlords
yeah,
of the Deep.
They were coming in.
Oh no,
they
Warlords.
Warlords
they were coming in through the wormholes.
Yeah, Warlords were farming. Warlords and Golden Plague were farming.
Compared to us.
Pod.
And so from our perspective, we'd never had to deal with like hole control or anything. So we were actually learning from the string beans as they were shutting off the entrances and making sure that people actually couldn't get armies in to fight us.
So that's what I wanted to talk about. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There were smaller groups that came in through filaments in the early days. They had access to certain systems, but the people who really wanted to evict, they were making use of the wormholes. And so you get like, I don't know, 60 to 80 guys through in like a hack fleet. And so when Fraternity figured that out, that was when they started coming into us because Weir Shota was in range of Vale. And Vale is, of course, where they're making all their ratting is. So that was a political issue for them, and that created
Vale of the Silent, not the system Vale.
Yeah, sorry. So for those of you who don't know, the way that Pochven works is if you're in that system, you can bridge out of it via blocks to anywhere in range of it, where it used to be. So those systems were a threat to Frat because we lived in Weir Shota, and we were able to bridge in their systems, and we were doing it because Rote, not just Rote, but other groups at the time were fighting Frat and Winterco in a little bit of a war. And so the entire reason the Frat even came after us is because we came and assisted them, the guys that were fighting Frat in Winterco. We were harassing their jump gates and shit. And so Frat came after us in Pochven, and that started a whole war.
Which was beneficial for us because we're a pretty friendly organization. We're little Care Bear HiSec motherfuckers, so everybody likes us. But you guys going out and making enemies helped us to learn how to fight. It was great. We got to experience some big fleet combat because of the string beans.
Yes, making enemies.
I have to say,
Val Davis is great at that.
I have to say that was actually the best thing about the invasions to begin with, and then the creation of Pochven afterward was, as someone who spent a lot of time in the HR booth, there were a tremendous number of people who came back to EVE Online because of the invasions, and who came back and who were interested in EVE again, or even as brand new players who were like, yo, I heard there's some crazy thing going on with these triangle people, and there's this new zone that's really difficult. Like, what's up with that? And and I'm one of them. Like I was winning EVE happily for almost 2 years.
I hadn't played since Broski.
Yeah, and then I came back and it was like, oh, well, it's this triangle thing. Well, this looks interesting. While I'm waiting for Pappy to do something in Delve, and then so it brought in a tremendous number of new players. A lot of Strybog Clade's membership were drawn from HiSec and LowSec people who had really never PvP'd before, and to a great extent are still, learning and getting their wings. And it has been just a tremendous amount of fun. I wish that CCP had more of those kind of things up its sleeves to get the players excited again, as we've seen, massive lulls in the number of, concurrent users. on at the same time this year, and I miss those days when people were excited to have something new to chew on.
Yo, just seeing the change in our own organization, like a small gang like ours, what it did. Jas is making the joke that Strybog farmed us. They did. They absolutely did. They put their boot on our neck and 10-1 stomped our fleets into dust every day. Electus Matari, an organized, actual, respectable PvP organization, came and kicked our asses sideways. And we learned. And we grew. And we went toe-to-toe with organizations much bigger and better trained and better equipped than us. And we've learned to survive. And for 1 year, we've stood our ground in the most dangerous cutting-edge space in this game. We have not been moved. We've made friends and we've made enemies. And golly, it's been quite a ride.
On the other side of people coming back to the game for the invasions, there's a lot of people who left after Chapter 3 because they were disappointed with how it ended, especially on our side. There are a lot of people who put a lot of effort into Chapter 3 obviously people put tons of effort on both sides. We saw a lot of these fights that were people from both sides there for like 16, 18 hours pushing for their side. And a lot of people were disappointed at the end of it. And quite a few people that I can name left the game because the ending wasn't handled as well as it should have been.
Yeah, that happened to both sides. I believe Stribog.
Yeah, there were a whole bunch of Trig people who quit because they didn't like how Pochven turned out. It wasn't just Econ people.
A lot of the Trigs left, man. A lot of us, because again, we came from some pretty risk-averse space, and then we moved to a place where every single day is a fight for survival. Some people weren't having fun anymore.
Yeah,
our numbers dwindled. Yeah, we lost a lot of people who just couldn't enjoy Pochven. But I really think that, I mean, these communities could benefit from maybe learning from this experience and just trying to make the content ourselves, either arranging ways that we can still fight each other with fleets, or even perhaps doing some kind of economic thing. What still bothers me to this day is that to produce Triglavian vessels, I need to have somebody out there shooting Triglavian ships. I can't do it. I have high standings. So, if you Edencoms want to harvest materials for me while I'm out there shooting your Edencom boys so you can build the Thunder Children or whatever, maybe we can trade free markets and all that.
Yeah, CCP.
Yeah, not being able to buy the Triglavian stuff from the Triglavian stations themselves still needs to be addressed.
Wouldn't that be sensible if I could just buy it at the LP store?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Buy it, just be able to buy the parts that drop that you need to produce it, because they sell the BPCs and they're not the most efficient way of getting them, because you can get them for dead cheap from all the Abyss runners that just flog them off on contract.
Well, for certain ones of them, yes. So the ones that really matter is the, well, not really matter, but the ones that for the LP store are the Zunitra stuff.
Well, the problem is now you have so much Zernitra materials on the market in general in New Eden.
Well, yes, but that's in my humble opinion, that's not a function of the Zernitra stuff. That's a function of the cap industry changes that made producing caps in general completely unprofitable.
Well, it's also just because Zernitra is a very niche use, like Dreadnought. It's a lot of
but I used to be able to build my Zernitra for the same price as a regular Dread, and it was I mean other than the LP store items. But now if you want to build a Zernitra, it's stupid, and now no one builds them.
You watch what you say about the Zernitra. I have a thing for Triglavian dreads.
So the only thing I
used to have one sold out. Shout out TSK.
The only story I have about
Zernitra in 2 minutes.
The only story I have about a Zernitra is one time we brought one into a major conduit because it couldn't fit into the World Arc site, and even with Vindicator webs, it couldn't hit shit.
Yeah, it's really a strange.
It's not good.
It's not that it's not good. It's just what you use dreadnoughts for. The Zernitra is not the best at it. You're generally using like dreads on a massive dread bomb where the moment it hits grid, you want to be able to apply max damage because there's a good chance that it's not going to survive for the next 20 seconds. The best place you're going to find
convinced structures move too fast for it to hit.
Yeah. The best
not to go down
Zernitras is in wormhole space, but you don't really have that many dread versus dread fights anymore in there.
Not to go full fucking rabbit hole, but wouldn't it be neat if a Zernitra could be high-angle weapon fit and you have 3 battleship guns instead of 1 cap gun, and so you could make it like an anti-sub-cap platform?
It would still be worse than a normal dread, though, because it takes so long to get up to full.
Inexplicably, the Zernitra only has 1 utility high, despite the fact that it has bonuses for all the utility highs, like a normal trick ship.
What you need is a high-angle Iddon commander that hits 10 ships.
And the other thing too is that we have another dreadnought that is supposed to make use of its utility highs because of its bonus, the Chemosh, and
the Blood
uses
Radle.
that for.
I want one so bad.
It's so bad.
The Chemosh has 2 utility highs. It's quite good.
Yeah,
Well,
it doesn't have enough utility highs for it to be useful. But Castle Kickers do have a Chemosh. So if you
we
want
give a Chemosh, what?
You want to
Anyway, we're continue with.
No,
Pochven.
I'm sorry, Arsia. I have to ask this. You have a Chemosh in Pochven. Wait, what?
No, not in Pochven. No.
Never mind. I don't care anymore. Never mind. Go on, Arsia.
Yeah, it's not important.
Back to Pochven. So it's not the dread rating show. It's the Pochven show.
Exactly. I don't care about your.
So I
is this show PG-13?
Yes, it is. You should have to read so much.
Yes.
Well, so moving on, I guess we have to address the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that Pochven is generally not really in use in majority by the people living there. It's in use by these larger null groups that are in here. And I need to ask Sahara, because this is your chance to explain to the universe, is Strybog a goon corporation? Because you guys have received a lot of help from them in the past. You got their FCs to come in there and convince Maldavius to kick me from his alliance.
I think that Sahara and I can probably both equally speak to that, because I think we were probably both equally involved in those discussions at the time. Maybe Sahara more on the goon side, but from the Strybog side, like, let's talk about it. Let's do it.
Go ahead, Jasmine. Please go ahead and answer the question that was directed to Sahara.
No,
Go
you're
ahead.
right. I'm being extremely sexist right now. Go on.
I will say the same thing that we have said from the beginning, and I don't know that anybody really cares all that much, honestly. But they are our friends. We have been allied, as in a diplomatic alliance on paper since early January of 2021. So we're coming up on almost a year as a blue ally to the Imperium, not just Goonswarm, but the entire Imperium. However, we have an independent, we have always had an independent leadership team that does not answer to Mittens. We are friends with them.
Such bullshit. Go on.
I mean, I was literally kicked from the alliance because of Alterari Phoenix. And
no, I think
MWR Warrior.
I hear you, Arsia, and I don't want to come across as I want to let Sahara finish, but
let her finish
because of the politics. There is so much bullshit here.
You can give your input after she's done.
Okay. I have also always been upfront about the fact that I am a dual citizen. So, in other words, I push an F1 button a few times a month for Goonswarm, and I have since, I don't know, around the time I first started playing the game in late 2017. And I am now, somewhat surprisingly, even to myself, running Strybog Clade. Shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone that the amount of time that I spend between those two organizations is vastly different. I spend far, far more time managing, thinking about, worrying about, cajoling, herding cats on the Strybog Clade side than I do on the Goon side, where I literally am a Logi pilot line member in a very large corporation, ASCII, kick ASCII, by the way, in Goonswarm.
So kick ASCII.
Yeah. So that's really it. We have anyway. Now I guess I will turn it over to Jasmine to tell me why everything in my life experience and what
don't do that because I actually like you. I like you a lot, and I'm not gonna talk shit about you at all. But what you said about goons, in my humble opinion, the entire plan from the beginning, if not by everyone, I'm not going to try to be some conspiracy bullshit person, but I think that there were certainly people who saw the potential of Pochven for goons, and they started to have their gears start turning, and they kind of made their moves. So
the thing was that person who you're talking about was Maldavius. Like, I'm just being straight up with you guys.
Of course.
These are the conversations me and him had. He explained to me, like, even before Pochven occurred, while we were still back in like August, like he said, I used to be in Goonswarm. I have friends there. They've asked me to come back to help defend Delve, but I'm more interested in this. That's great. You know what? I used to be in Goonwolf. That's awesome. If you guys want to be aligned with them, that's fine. The problems I have with this was the fact that since before Pochven formed, I had been hammering it into him like, hey, you know, we got to think of a long-term skill plan. Like, we're eventually going to have to defend our space. We're going to have to choose, like, what kind of battleships do we want people to be flying with? And every step of the way, it was just, oh, we'll get to that when it comes. We'll get to that when it comes. Don't worry. And we finally get to this point where now we have Alterari and this other guy coming over. We have these more like Imperium FCs coming over to assist Strybog. And
yeah, and can I speak to that?
Actually, no. Can I? Because
Absolutely,
the Strybog FCs that you're talking about in particular, who are Alterari Phoenix and Mike Flood. Alterari Phoenix.
And at the time, me too. But yeah, go on.
Alterari Phoenix happens to be my IRL brother from another mother. Good friend of mine, and the only reason that he came to help us all was not some conspiracy theory, but as a personal favor to me, because I said, yo, I'm in this adorable RP Triglavian alliance that's trying to find its wings, and we really need help. Can you come help me? And he did. Mike Flood happens to be a very good friend of his. Dave Archer is a very good friend with both of them. So they started to come and hang out with us, not because of some secret plan, but literally because I asked them to, because I care about this group.
Yeah, but Sahara, isn't that what I just said? People in Goons who were smart had their brains start turning and started making moves on behalf of the Alliance. I'm not trying to say that you were doing crazy shit, but yeah, exactly what you just said. You and Mal were seeing the ways in which there could be influence pushed upon the zone. And I don't think, in my humble opinion, I don't think that either you or Mal foresaw the consequences of those decisions in terms of bringing all of Goon's enemies to fight us. But I'm not, like, again, I like you a lot and I have no problems with you. But I think that there were a lot of short-term fuck-ups, basically, where people didn't realize the consequences that they were going to have.
Why did we not have a battleship doctrine until we finally had our Tatara reinforced, due to the fact that Maldavius was having bomber fleets bridge out into Tribute and Vale and hitting fraternity shit? Like, that's what I don't understand. He had all these opportunities to set up, and he didn't do any of that until he.
Well, we did.
It was a
We
good
did
idea.
do that. We did go out and hit their shit in Vale.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but he didn't. Like I said, he didn't come up with any sort of home defense fleet until his own shit got pushed in. And what home defense fleet did he come up with?
Because he was relying on the gate standings. That's all he was doing.
Yeah, it wasn't just that. There was a lot of stuff going on with the defense of Pochven. So, I mean, there are probably very few people here who understand that, other than, I mean, frankly, me and Sahara. At the time, it was all about the wormholes. You're right, the gate standings were really important. And so what we were doing, and Sarah was really the person who led this, frankly, rolling all the wormholes so that with Weiroshoda they faced to Otanumi and etc. The wormholes were the key to evicting people.
Well, that was another big problem I had. I knew that we couldn't rely on the wormholes, the gate standings to save us, and I wanted us from the longest time to get ready for getting our ship pushed in by some outside force, regardless of if this gate or wormhole system was going to help us. Because I know very easy ways that people could get into Weiroshoda through wormholes. Like it would not have been difficult for them to do so if people knew how to operate around wormholes.
That's cap. No, you're talking about like. Totally random wormhole connections. Like at the time,
no.
When that fight was happening, it was
people. If people wanted to evict you at a time when the gate standings were still there, and even though you were opening Otanumi to Weiroshoda and Weiroshoda Otanumi, that doesn't prevent 6 people having 6 Higgs battleships cloaked in system ahead of time, weeks ahead of time.
No, that's cap. That's so random. That's so random.
No, that is exactly how shit goes down.
That's the playbook of evicting wormholers. That's how they do it.
You don't understand how far people will go to get their plan in motion, and that's why I was so confused to see, like, I guess Frat has struggled so much at first. I guess they didn't really understand how to combat against wormhole mechanics like that. But I just, from the beginning, I just knew that he needed more than just allies. He needed more than just gate standings to keep him safe, and he didn't choose to do any of that until the time finally came when it was like almost too late for him to do so.
I hope
it wasn't just Mal though. Like it was a whole alliance. Like Mal was obviously he was the big person we talked about, but there were a lot of people going on behind the scenes, like Sahara and Shireen, and there was a whole ass group.
And I hope you'll forgive me pointing out that it's tedious to nitpick the leadership of someone who's effectively won Eve. I butt heads with Maldavius as much as anyone in here. But for my part, when the problem with the goons rose up and I saw him put in a position that tested his loyalty to either the Trig movement or the goons, I saw him ready himself to shoot goons. So that's the only thing it feels worth saying. He's no longer here. His part in this story was controversial.
It's relevant.
And
it doesn't matter that he's no longer here. He's the reason that he is part of the reason that Pochven is in today.
Yeah, I've got my problems with the man, but he did a lot.
I'm just pointing out that for about 20 minutes now, we're sitting here talking about how he didn't do this or that, and I'm like, frankly, like, who cares? You know?
So, can I just say that we are going quite long for a weeknight show? Can we agree to try to wrap things up in the next half hour and then do a part 2 if we need to?
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely move on to the person.
We haven't even reached the point where Rogue joined Pochven, by the way.
Yeah,
I just want to point that out.
Going kind of
since I've existed in this space for no reason.
Let's talk, Murray. Let's talk.
So let's
You came to be a thorn in my side,
more.
is what it was.
Let's say we talk for another half hour, and then we can do a part 2 if people need to.
All I see is the viewers scaling up. So go on, Murray.
I mean, before we move on to this, I just want to say one last thing about this whole fiasco. Like back in January, when activity was really low in Strybog, I got authorization from the LaserHawks leadership, from our CEO in our annual meeting, that if we come to control Pochven structures, we will come and defend them. And I went to Maldavius with this and said, hey, if you don't think that your alliance can control your structures, if you don't think you can defend them, let me hold on to them. I will freeport them for the universe. We would be happy to come and fight whoever wants to come and fight these. We'll obviously try to get our own defenders to come in. And it would be better this way. Instead, what did we see? We saw his chest thumping end up leading him to burning down his own structures. And I just have to ask this one last thing, this one major question for Sahara, because when I saw that Maldavius quit playing Eve, I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I went to you and I asked, hey, would you like me to come back? I would love to help you guys. But then I noticed Maldavius didn't actually leave your corporation. He's still there, like with a retired or director role. So I have to ask, should Mal come back to this game and ask for director roles or even for CEO back? Are you going to give it to him?
The answer is no. He's first of all, he's never going to come back. We left his character a legacy inside Strybog Clade merely because, and he has no director roles in Strybog Clade. Everything has been stripped from him. All of his alts that used to be in the various alt corporations have all been kicked. They're all in NPC corporations now. We merely left the character Maldavius in Strybog Clade because, frankly, it felt wrong that the founder of Strybog Clade is no longer in Strybog Clade. I don't think he is ever coming back. I still chat with him on Discord every now and again, talking about non-Eve related things. He's a professional security consultant and game developer, and a very smart person, and he's still a pleasant person to talk to as a human being. I don't think he's ever coming back to Eve. Like any organization that changes over the leadership, to sort of quote the idea behind Lord of the Rings, you really can't go back home again. It's not the Strybog he left is no longer the Strybog Clade of today. I tend to think that it's a better place, but it is also changed fundamentally so that he would not be the CEO again.
All right, that's good to hear. I mean, I always thought he was the right character for the role, but he just did not have the right attitude for it, and it pained me so much to see what ended up becoming of his alliance because of him. But yes, let's move on to the current events now, because this is definitely what people are seeing these days on Z-Kill.
I almost want to respond to something with respect to the burning down of our own structures. A lot of people thought that was Maldavius copping out and that the rest of us, like good, loyal little slaves, we jumped on board. I believe the credit for that idea, that's Opus' idea. That like Opus and I were joking one night. We were literally bullshitting in comms, and I swear I think it was his idea, but somewhere in our conversation it was like, what if we just stopped with this timer hell? What if we just burnt our own structures and walked away from this? And I got a PM from Maldavius like 2 hours later. He's like, I heard you and Opus were talking about burning your own structures. Is that true? And I was like, yeah, kind of jokingly. And he was like, I'm in. Let's do it. So for that, there's a misconception out there that this was like his. It wasn't even his idea. Like, he kind of signed on to something that the Kybernauts and the ITC and we were all talking about in our own little adventures.
Well, you just said that you were joking about it, and then he's the one that said, let's do it. So it was...
Well, no, you have to understand. We started out joking, and then we increasingly realized the utility of, like, what are we actually fighting for? We recognize we're fighting against odds that small gangs like us can't beat. And increasingly it went from, like, wouldn't it be funny to, like, actually... Yeah, absolutely. I think it was convenient for him, if we're going to be honest. Well, he asked if we had influence, and I believe absolutely. In his eyes, from the perspective of Maldavius, that must be very convenient because the fight was unwinnable, so it gave him an out. But for us, being a small gang, we recognized the writing on the wall the moment we started fighting no blocks. And for us, it was also important because allies like Jas at the time, before he set us red without saying anything, were coming and spilling blood on our behalf. They were whelping ships left and right to try to protect our infrastructure because we were too weak to do it ourselves. So when we decided to shoot our own structures with no influence from Maldavius whatsoever, it was basically saying we're unwilling to watch our friends die for us anymore. Thank you. We appreciate it. But for months and months, we've had people calling out of work, letting their real lives go to ruin so that they could defend these structures that are ultimately going to die anyway. So we did this without any actual consultation from Maldavius. He just kind of signed on to our plan.
Okay. Well, it did seem to me it seemed like he egged you over the edge. Then would you admit that maybe? But
well, I don't even care about Mal. Let's completely take it away from the individual person. There were so many groups in Pochven that just completely rolled over, and it was pathetic.
That's one way to look at it. But honestly, dude, we were served up on a silver platter against odds that we couldn't possibly fight. And again, from our perspective, people like Kylon,
you absolutely could have fought.
No,
you absolutely you chose not to.
So if you have, I'm going to finish this sentence.
Most of my structures are still alive.
I am going to finish this sentence if it kills you, Jessamine. Okay?
Love you.
We were not able to defend those structures on our own, and we were thus relying on our friends to continue spending money and coming and fighting. It was an unwinnable war. And you say that we could continue doing that forever, but already one of our main operators, Kylon, one of the main organizers for our group, had to call in for work multiple times. His car ended up on the side of the road because he couldn't find time to get it worked on. We were putting everything in our real lives on hold to do this thing, to defend Strybog structures, which weren't even ours. Literally, like, it was every day with this. And so maybe that's your life, and maybe you've got the numbers and the resources to whelp like that infinitely, but we didn't, and we weren't willing to see you do that on our behalf. So I didn't much appreciate you setting us red, but I wish you would see it more as a gesture of respect and of mutual acceptance.
The issue that I see is that you were saying you were served up on a silver platter, but as Jazz was saying, everyone rolled over. As when Castle Kickers came in,
hundreds of people, hundreds of people.
Yeah, after like 2 or 3 weeks, you guys could not defend your entire space
against Dreadbomb. To be fair.
Say again, Jazz?
Yeah, we're fighting way above our pay grade, dude.
No, I was just saying, to be clear, you were fighting Dreadbomb, a fleet of 40 people. It was not a very oppressive force that you were fighting.
So in early Pochven, this was small gang space. It was viable for us to have structures then because this was 15-man fights. This was up our alley. When you start giving us 40-man hack fleets, this is your pay grade. You do this. You talked at the beginning of this show about fighting Titans. I've never even fought a Titan. So you and I have very different...
I'm not trying to suck my own dick, but if you want to hold essentially Sov...
don't word it like that.
I apologize. If you're trying to hold Sov in space, you have to assume that people are going to try and take it from you. So if you're a 10-man group and some 40-man group tries to fight you, you have to accept that.
Yes, and we were willing.
Did you think
we were willing? I'm sorry. We were willing and able to take that fight for quite a while with the power of our friends and our local allies. But again, the odds continued to snowball. More and more people came, and we saw what was going to happen. And the rules changed. Overnight, when they got rid of the standings on the gates, the rules of our space changed, and we were willing to adapt to that. And that meant unshackling ourselves from having to do timers every time somebody came to knock on our door. Now we're free. Now we do whatever we want. We engage in content not because people force us to, but because we choose to. It just simply became the case that for 15 people to own a structure in Pochven stopped being viable.
Yeah, sure, but I feel like you're complaining like, oh no, I bought a structure or owned a structure, anchored it, whatever, and had to defend it. That's such a hardship. Okay, so then you lost it. You get what I'm saying? Like, I don't really understand your complaint.
No, I'm not complaining. I'm actually telling you exactly what happened and why it's not us rolling over. We made a tactical decision, and you got very emotional about it and set all your friends red without a word to them. There are 2 people in this game who have ever had the balls to set us red without even telling me to my face, and that was Maldavius and you. And here's the thing: from our side, we've only ever respected you. When we made the decision to shoot our own structures, it was out of consideration for the sacrifice that friends like you were making on our behalf. So this whole,
how is it consideration to the sacrifice? All you're saying is, by the way, all your hard work, we've just removed it in an instant instead of saying.
That's exactly how I feel. Is I spent like a year
and defend what we can. Instead, always like this is. I'm biased because we were doing the crab sliding and stuff, and like there was a lot of emotion going back and forth between you guys and us. But all we saw was 3 very, very entitled alliances who did not know how to defend like any space whatsoever against a tiny amount of people, let alone people that would eventually come in. Yes, the standings being reduced was being removed from the gates was, pretty stupid. Like just overnight as a change was dumb. Like we'll all agree on that. But at the same point, when you're struggling to defend against, say, 40 people, you should say, maybe we should sell some of these structures off because we know we can't defend them all.
I don't think you understand, comrade. The moment we launched structures in Pochven, we knew they were dead. Every one of them has a timer. To this day, you're just counting down. Nothing can be anchored, so there will come a day, ultimately, when no player structures exist in this space. We all knew this. It was about having fun on the ride down. We had no illusions that we were going to sit there and hold this space and stand our ground forever. It's simply the case that when the standings were on the gates, 15 people could hold that space, and we did. We held Harva for months, and it was fun doing it. But when the rules changed, rather than allowing ourselves to stop having fun, rather than letting the game dictate how we were going to play and making life hell, where every day it's now just like, fuck, log in, fight these guys again, try to fight them off, barely hang on by the skin of our teeth, they're back tomorrow, they reinforce it again. We did that for months. It wasn't fun. We decided that we wanted to have fun playing Eve, and I'm not ashamed of that decision.
But you had so many
Guys,
structures
wrap up
to
in 15 minutes. Wrap up in 15 minutes.
But my point is that like you couldn't defend your space, and the only reason that you were defending it initially was because people, assuming that the gate standings would stay the same, which they more or less should have with like minor changes, eventually people would have realized it's worth grinding the standings up, and eventually someone would come in and start attacking you. So it was at best a stopgap for you guys, which is where you should have said, maybe we should just sell some of these assets off and
why would we do that?
defend the ones we want.
No, we could have sold them.
That's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. There's the entitlement. You're saying this is our space.
You, sir, believe you're entitled to our structures, that we should have sold them?
From my perspective, I don't think Zero is entitled as long as he acknowledges the structure is going to die eventually, which he seemed to do.
And rather than give them to someone else, rather than allow someone else to use our work to take what we invested and make some new military power in the region, we burnt every structure in Harva. We were the last docks ever in that system, and no one will take that from us. I don't want you to have it. You sound more entitled than me, sir.
All I was going to say is, can we take it down like a notch? I love you all, please.
Yeah, but we've never wanted your structures. My point is, you could have saved some of those structures and had more of an influence than you have now. And sure, I understand that you guys, like, in real life, like, if you commit everything, I'd, like, fully agree, like, that sucks. But you were the guy, you put yourself in that position and didn't realize what was coming. And
we knew what was coming.
But no, you all knew, everyone knew what was coming because it is an inevitability. I agree with that.
And by burning our structures, we earned an audience with CCP. We, the little guys, who aren't Maldavius, who don't have frequent we made them listen to us.
Dude. The audience with CCP was us. You didn't want an audience with CCP when we invited you to the talks with CCP. So don't say that.
No. That's Praise Zoria Discord was. It started off as a way to get around talking to CCP because you guys shouldn't have came to the table from the get-go because this whole crab sliding mess was a bunch of bull crap.
Can I say, I don't want to I agree.
Defend yourself against fair elections.
Can we describe what crab sliding is? All of us here know. The audience.
Everybody, please! I beg all of you. Let's take a deep breath and calm down. Everyone's.
I want to speak in defense of the Crab Sliders, who I've been vocal against. You've seen my forum posts. I've been pretty nasty about their gameplay. But for what it's worth, these guys were here on day one. They did some interesting gameplay. They figured out some weird little clever ways to make money. You're as Pochven as any of us, bro. You've been out there in the small gangs. You've been doing the PvP. I respect you. I hate your guts, but I respect you.
Okay,
and you're one of us, man.
Yeah, because if Arsia wanted to explain what crab sliding was, which is now seagulling, hence the mask, because we own that now. It's our word, you cannot use it. Yep. When the OBS were finally fixed, which was, I believe, was like mid-February. I believe those were some
16th, I want to say.
February. Yeah. So it was around. So that was when they finally got fixed, where they wouldn't nuke your standings to tribal aliens if you shoot them. They actually gave you an ability to loot the dread loot, and it gave you a payout, and it wouldn't bug to hell during that time because there was so much problems with it. So at that point coincided when, I'm going to throw Opus under the bus slightly, you kicked one of your best FCs for...
I did not kick him. He left. And when he left, he was eating a little B word, and he wouldn't actually listen to nobody. And so what he did was literally just become a pain in everyone's side in Pochven for the next 8 months. He's nothing but a troll.
You say a pain in the side. I think
he's a good troll. I'll give him that.
Trillion.
I did not kick him. He left on his own.
Okay, he'll have to agree to disagree there. But anyway, moving on. So we discovered when going through these, because it was the same content as is Chapter 3 Invasions, we found a way. Originally, it was stealing the loot from the Dread, which is why the Dread wreck started warp inhibiting people. And then it became if we just contribute to it, because it was nothing like incursions, it was anyone on there who helped got a payout. It just so happened that in Pochven, when suddenly 15 people were doing it, the amount per pilot was really, really high by comparison to Chapter 3. So Beta, who was the original crab slider who came up with all this, said to me, I was doing other stuff in the Galenta Grand Prix and just in K-Space, man, my own business, like, come here, we'll have a load of fun. We'll really, really piss off the locals like you have no idea. And you make tons of money. And then it became its own thing. Like, initially it was, we were doing it in rifters, and then you guys countered us, and then we would counter back and slowly up ship here and there. And it just kept going like that. But that is basically what crab sliding was, like, at least at the start. And the sad thing for us was, it was not so much Stribog and Breadfleet. I can't remember if Kyber did it, but it was... Oh, no, sorry, it was the opposite way. So it was Stribog, Kyber, and Breadfleet. What's your alliance called, sorry? The ITC. Xeromus.
We were IT, now we're Toast. ITC got E.
Yeah, the Anything 25 thing, that was the shame. So you guys were the first to suddenly, instead of trying to counter us, we're suddenly like, well, this is exploits, this is bullshit. Everyone reporting, blah, blah, blah. And we eventually seeded spies into your guys who were like, these guys are actually like frothing at the mouth at how mad they are at us. And the Russians were like, we just killed them. It is not easy. It's not. But that was the main shame. And then that just came to a head eventually. But we were stealing so much money from you. Like at that point.
I had the opposite experience. I think it was Beta and a couple of the other crab sliders were actually super nice to me. It was weird. Like I was getting valuable intel from you guys, and our fleets, because we're small gang, we had like 7-8 guys on grid anyway, so there was usually room for you. So we actually had no problem with you. It was like the Strybog guys were pissed. They were mad that we were hanging out with you, but there was a couple of the crab sliders who hated me, and they were like, it's not an exploit, how dare you call it an exploit? And I'm like, bro, I'm not mad about it, but what you're doing is you're using game mechanics to do something that's that's an exploit. I'm sorry. And ultimately I was right. Sorry guys, I'm not mad, but some people
it's got really... an exploit, by the way. It still is an exploit. It's
an exploit, bro.
It isn't. Let me second. So I've actually found this amazing resource. It's on the CPC website where it lists all the relevant exploits in the game, and it's never been on there. Still is.
Okay, listen.
Every
time the crab sliding thing comes up, this is the exact same conversation that happens every time, and I'm going to renew my threat. I'm going to start singing the Meow Mix song if you don't stop, because it just keeps going and going and going.
But eventually, like, it came to a head. Like, you guys all, we do accept it. We adapted. We're making way more money now than we ever have. I think 3 days ago we ran 12 sites in the span of 5 hours just using Gilas. Like, we just make a ridiculous amount of money in here. It's stupid. Like, obviously people can push us off, and it does happen, but we're still making so much money. We're
down for just a few minutes left. I'm going to give everybody a minute. I'm going to go through everybody here, and everybody's going to get a minute to say their final thoughts. Drake, do you want to start?
I would say if you guys want to come to Pochven, it's a great place. There's absolutely no barrier to entry now. Get a phone, come in. You'll probably die to Africanized gate camps, or what's left. Like, if you want to join anyone, if you want to come and be an asshole, join us. If you want to do PvP, join Jazz or Breadfleet or Opus. Maybe not Opus, he just said.
Wait, what?
This one.
We're wormholers now, but anyways, go on.
Jess.
Well, wormholes connects to trick space. Like, wormholes like the entry to trick.
Absolutely.
Jess, your turn. A minute.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for having me. This episode kind of got out to a little bit of shit of back and forth. There was so much we could have talked about. We didn't, unfortunately. But Pochven is a great set of space. We've all had our disagreements, but I think that we can all probably agree that the space is designed for PvP. Small gang PvP in particular, and I would really appreciate if all of you guys who are watching this episode who've never fucking been to that space, I'm swearing constantly, I'm so sorry, it's my nature, I'm a sailor, come out with your Osprey Navy issues or what have you, and just take part in the glorious revelry that is small gang PvP in the only zone that exists still in Pochven other than ESS, which is largely fraternity Vargers. Bye.
Zero.
Whatever your disposition, wherever you fly, whatever corner of space you live in, the government needs to be abolished. I encourage you to go to your local library, pick up some anarchist literature, find your nearest organization, start helping out. Mutual aid is the way. Do good in your community. Come to Pochven, join Breadfleet. I yield the balance of my time.
Opus.
It's a great place.
I accept the balance of zero.
Oh gosh, no. Pochven is a great place. It's people are passionate. People love the gameplay. People have all kind of experiences out here, good and bad, and that's what makes the space great. Is it's one of the last pieces of space need where small gang subcap warfare can happen. So yeah.
Sahara.
Hi, thank you very much for this very interesting chat. If nothing else, therapeutic for some people, I imagine. Pochven, I will echo the words of the summing up that we've just heard. Pochven is a fascinating place. It's a place that elicits a great deal of emotion from the people who live here. Though many of us who are on this panel have been against each other in combat or had friction at various times, I don't think there's any doubt that the reason that there are such high emotions is because it is a place that we, for some reason, care about and means a lot to all of us.
Tolstoy?
Yeah, like Sahara said, this definitely is an important region. It's not only fun, but it really represents something that you just don't see anywhere else in EVE. And personally, while I wish that there were more like wormhole connections to other areas of space, it really is a step in how it was executed. Maybe not, but the philosophy behind it really is a step in the right direction for CCP to getting away from just how the status quo has been for the past 18, 19 years in this game. We have so much PvE that has not been iterated on for over a decade, and when it was created, the game was just such a different place than it is now. And Pochven really is a fresh breath of air compared to a lot of the other things you see. And I really hope that we can get a second episode going, talking more about current events. I know Murray wasn't really that talkative and eventually left because he didn't participate in the earlier times than we did. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about what's currently going on in Pochven, a lot of the conflicts that are going on currently. But thank you for having us all on here today. I'm really glad that we got this time to settle our debts. And Sahara, I really am glad to see the way that you're running Strybog now. I've just been so concerned and so upset about how terrible Maldavius ran it into the ground, and just how much better things could have been. Like you guys could have had, I don't want to say so much more, but I mean, you could have given more to the universe in general.
Anyway,
I'm honestly just like angry because this could have been so much better. I think we have all a lot more to say, and I
we
think everyone
can
was kind of like,
almost
angry.
certainly do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, I think everyone was angry tonight and had a lot of shit to say to get off their chests, and was.
It was
probably
actually
the most
less angry than I
productive
thought.
episode.
Yeah, it was a good thing we didn't spend so much time talking about current events, I guess, or else it would have been more anger.
I thought it was quite nice.
I mean, I got a little angry, but you know.
I thought it would be quite civil, all things considered.
All right, everybody, that's all the time we have. Take us out. Nick?
All right, thanks once again, everybody. Hey, the panel of folks freaking loved it. Thanks, everybody.